Hi, welcome to the fifth in my series, Demystifying Mindfulness and Meditation. So we've covered a lot of things in the last 4 sessions. So if you haven't watched those and you are a beginner or you're new to all of these concepts, it might be worth going all the way back to part 1, which you can find on my YouTube channel, on LinkedIn or on Facebook. They'll all be stored there in the videos section. So we had part 1, which was an introduction to a framework that I've been using, and actually I will just pop up here again. So this is the framework I've been using to explain mindfulness and meditation, and how rather than thinking of them as distinctly different things, we can think of them as being a set of tools and techniques that help us to get control over our mind and over our thoughts, which can often be out of control. So we talked about how, generally nowadays, we've got a lot of stuff going on, a lot more than we might have had, say, 150, 200 years ago. We might have had different pressures back then, but they'd have been a bit more immediate and pressing and kind of right here and now stuff. And a lot of what stresses us out nowadays, or a lot of what we've got going on in our heads, is often stuff to do with the future planning. We live in a much more delayed return or delayed reward world nowadays. That's a lot of W's in there. We have our rewards are delayed. So a couple of centuries ago, we would do some work and we would get paid immediately in bread or whatever it was we were going to get given. But we have this delayed reward model in our world now, which causes us an awful amount of stress. We also have our little mini computers with us all the time, which are constantly pinging to get our attention. So we talked about how we can start to employ mindfulness and everyday mindfulness. So just becoming aware of what's actually happening right here, right now. So coming away from all of the stuff that has happened, all of the stuff that might be going to happen, and coming right back into the present moment to what's happening right here, right now. And the things that we talked about there were how hobbies are usually incredibly mindful things. So knitting or mountain bike riding, doing jigsaws, all of these things require focused concentration. And so because of that, they're actually really mindful. We can't be thinking about something that happened yesterday or something we've got to do tomorrow while we're engaged in that mindful hobby. We also talked in this section about the senses and how we can remember how we might have, what something tasted like or sounded like in the past, or what something might look like in the future, for example. But our actual sensory experience is right here in the present. And so tuning in to what we can see, what we can smell, what we can hear, what we can taste, what we can touch, often brings us right back into the present moment. The other thing I mentioned here briefly is about how oxygen is really, really good. So when we have got into that really, really stressy place, oxygen is a really, really good way of coming back into the present moment by taking a big deep breath or drinking a glass of water. So just starting to become mindful, going back again actually just to the main scale there, just so this idea that what we're doing is we're going from having a brain that's full of all sorts of stuff, and we're gradually starting to reduce the amount of things in it with everyday mindfulness. And then the next step on from that is focused meditation or mindful meditation. And there are a lot of different meditations out there, but they all essentially involve concentrating on one thing intensely, so that everything else is kind of pushed out of the mind in a way, if you like. And so here we talked about the difference between self-directed versus guided focused meditation. So you can self-direct yourself by concentrating on an object like a flower or a candle. You can also self-direct a focused meditation by maybe focusing on your breathing or another activity like walking, or you could use a mantra or a phrase. So mantra is really just a phrase, but with a specific meaning. So those you can all do by yourself. You don't need a guide. But actually, this is the area where the guided meditations would come in. So you're focusing on a guide's voice and following a story to lead you to a relaxed state. We also talked about the sensory stuff here, but really that what the focused meditation is about is almost like an obsessive, repetitive attention to just one thing. So whereas everyday mindfulness might be the whole scene, everything that's in front of us, what's happening right here, right now in all of our senses, for example, focused meditation is about bringing it into one point of focus or one thing that we're focusing on. And to do that, to focus on one thing for 90 seconds is incredibly beneficial for us. It helps to drop all of our stress hormones and adrenaline and things like that. So that's what we talked about in that session. And then last week's session was all about my favorite, unfocused meditation or pure meditation, which is where we kind of flatlined the brain. And I talked through my 9 S's set of steps that will actually, and so if you haven't watched that episode and you're interested in learning how to meditate for yourself and how to meditate without focusing on something. So that kind of meditation whereby we really are thinking about nothing and we're sat in total peace. So this is the kind of thing that Zen, Vipassana, and transcendental meditation might be leading towards as well. So that total flatline of the brain. So I used a 9 S's framework to explain how I achieve that state, and you can follow that, and I'd love to know how you get on with that. So yes, we talked about how there's a strict ritual. So I talked about the 9 S's. We talked about how new skills take time. And a lot of people say to me, oh, I can't meditate, it's too difficult. But it does just take time and the benefits are huge. So all of that really was quite a grounded, kind of mystical, if you like, take on mindfulness and meditation. And how by employing these different tools and techniques, we can get more control over our mind. And so by stretching over to the far right of this kind of scale and spending time in unfocused, pure meditation regularly makes it a lot easier for us to employ everyday mindfulness. It makes it a lot easier for us to, in a moment, put down any thoughts that are flooding the mind and come back to a more focused kind of place where we're focusing on, actually, listen, let's get back to the task at hand. Let's get back to what's right here, right now. Put those thoughts out of my mind. So if you are someone who struggles with putting thoughts out of your mind, exploring these tools, practicing and getting better at them every time you undertake some focused meditation or some unfocused meditation, you are making it easier for yourself in everyday life to take control over your thoughts. So meditation is obviously associated quite a lot with the mystical. And so that's why I wanted to do this series, Demystifying Mindfulness and Meditation, because they don't have to really involve mystical concepts. That said, I think there is also some benefit in just touching in this final session on the mystical element of mindfulness and meditation. So these are the few things that I just wanted to touch on today. So the first thing is the human versus soul scale. And so I'm actually going to nip back now to the previous slide, and I'm just going to pop it up larger. How do I do that? Like that? Yes, great. Okay, so what I'm proposing from a re-mystification perspective is that when we're down there on the left-hand side in that full mind place, we're very much in a human place. We're in a human place, being a human in the world, coping with all the things that life throws at us, dealing with all the stuff that we did yesterday that we wish we hadn't, thinking about all the stuff we've got to do tomorrow that we wish we didn't, and even thinking about the stuff we did yesterday that we really enjoyed and the stuff we want to do tomorrow that we're really excited about. All of those thoughts are going round and round in our head. So it's very human. As we start to come up this scale then through everyday mindfulness, and in everyday mindfulness, the picture we've got there, you can see that the lady that's walking is very much connecting in with the elements, with the sunshine, with the trees, with nature, with the animals, that they can see all of that beautiful kind of natural world. And the natural world is an incredibly mystical thing. And so whether or not you are mystical yourself or whether you would label yourself spiritual, I can't imagine that there are many people who, when they go out into nature and really stop and look around and be mindful and be present with the nature, whether it be the babbling brook, whether it be the trees swaying in the breeze, whether it be the detail of the moss or the lichen close up on some tree bark, whatever it is that you're paying attention to, there is a mystical element to it. And if you haven't ever found that, I would invite you to go out into nature and to really try and connect with the natural world, because it sparks something different in us, and it awakens a part of us that when we're thinking about all that human stuff, all the doing, we're not really in touch with that so much. And it does take us to be conscious, to really take a big deep breath and focus on what's right here, right now, the natural world, whatever it is, to be really focused with that. So it's like we're actually engaging a different part of us. And so my argument would be, as we come down this scale from the full mind to the empty mind, we're coming away from the human and we're connecting back in more with our soul. And so what do I mean when I say soul? So at the heart of all of us, we're all quite similar, really. We are all human beings on this planet, having a human life, having a human experience here. We're all connected by that. And one of the spiritual kind of concepts is something called oneness, and that idea that we are actually all connected. And so the central tenet of every religion is to do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. And that's truth. So you can check out the kind of like the main teachings of all of the major religions, and all of them have at the heart of them, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. And so this idea of oneness, this idea that we're all the same, and when we're in that very human place, in that very full mind, it can be very easy to get very like rub up against other humans in not such a good way, to clash with other people. But when we come into this soul place, this really empty mind place, this real kind of thoughtless place, there is a real connectedness with everybody else. When we drop the thoughts, we drop the constructs, we drop the judgments, we drop the stories, we drop all of the stuff that our mind is trying to tell us, and we come to a still, flatlined place. We are more in touch then, I believe, with our soul. So if you can imagine, almost this graph then is a scale that's showing us coming from being more human to being in touch with our human self, to being in touch with our metaphysical self, our soul, the core of us, the crux of us, and we all have different beliefs around, what we are. But my belief is that we are a soul inhabiting a physical body, and it is the combination of that physical body and our soul that makes us human. And so, yeah, where we are on this scale, and where I am on this scale in any one day, can vary dramatically. So we can get really caught up in the human, but actually just going out and connecting with nature and taking that time to become mindful of what's there, meditating on a flower or a candle, and really the wondering, like, wow, fire is an amazing thing to just sit and wonder about it. But all of that is getting us more in touch with our soul and the true essence of who we really are, in my experience and in my belief system. So this re-mystification today, this scale, so where I've been talking about it in terms of full mind and empty mind, I'm now suggesting that actually it's a little bit, you could liken it to being very human, to being more in touch with our soul. So the more we move along that graph, from a mindful place to a meditative place to a totally unfocused meditative place, the more in touch with our soul we are. And so for me, I don't know whether how much work any of you have done, but we have a lot of different voices in our heads. Yeah, we have a lot of different voices saying lots of different things. So our view on something, or our perspective on something, can actually have lots of different shades. So we can be happy about something happening, but also sad about it happening, and a little bit grumpy too. So we can have lots of different feelings about the same thing. And so, I've lost my thread of thought there. So this idea of coming from being human to being soul. Yes. Okay. So we have lots of different voices. When we are in that soulful place, and when we're in the place where we're most connected to our soul, we don't have all those voices. There aren't so many different voices chipping in. And so if you ever have tried meditating and struggled because the thoughts keep coming, it's almost like people knocking on the door going, have you remembered you've got to do the shopping? Have you remembered you had an argument with somebody yesterday and you ought to do something about it? Have you remembered? Have you remembered? And as we get better and better at kind of like stopping all those knocks, like putting all those putting all the thoughts away, we actually, in my experience, access a much higher wisdom and a different voice, as it were, that comes from inside us, that is much more calm, much more sensible, much more logical, very, very calm, very, very gentle, and very, very helpful. So when I sit in meditation for a long period of time, if my intention when I go into that meditation, and I talk about intentions in the previous session and the one before, I think, if my intention was to get some clarity around something, when I'm sat deep in meditation for a long period of time, it's amazing how a few words can just drop into that quiet, flatlined place. And they are so clear and they make so much sense of whatever it was I was trying to figure out in my human head. The wisdom that comes to me when I'm sat in meditation is by far superior. It's a superior wisdom that I get when I'm sat in meditation. And I think actually that's why meditating helps me get on so much better in the day-to-day in my life, because having sat in meditation in the morning, you leave meditation feeling really clear. It's like you've checked in with your soul first thing in the morning and gone, hey soul, what do I need to be aware of today? What is it that I need to be focusing on right now? What would you like to say to me this morning? And so my intent in meditation is often, just, is there any guidance? Is there anything I need to know today? Is there anything I need to look at? So that idea that this scale, as well as being a full thoughts to full mind to an empty mind, is also a little bit of a human to soul scale. So that emptying the mind actually has a real benefit in terms of connecting us in with our highest level of wisdom and our best advice. The best advice we'd ever give to ourselves sits in that empty mind place. The other thing I wanted to say here was doing and being, and less is more. So going back again to the scale, this idea that down on the left-hand side in the full mind, we're kind of doing a lot, we're being with a lot of things, a lot of concepts. As we then gradually come along the scale, we're actually being with less. So we're being with the present moment rather than with everything that we can possibly think of. We're being with the present moment. We're being with this one thing. And then when we move into this final stage, the empty mind stage, we are literally just being with ourself, which can sometimes feel like an incredibly uncomfortable thing to do. And if you're somebody who likes to fill a silence, somebody who can't sit down quietly with a cup of tea for a couple of minutes without getting up to do something, this will be so amazing for you. It will change your life. It will revolutionize things. If you can get okay with sitting with yourself and being on your own and just being with yourself and your own thoughts and wisdom, it's an incredibly powerful thing to do. The point there I had was less is more. So the less things we are with, the more we can access that wisdom and the more benefit we can get. And then the final point I've put on here is centered non-reactivity. There are a lot of all the different religions out there. They've all got like a modern version, and most of them have got like a really ancient version. And so the ancient Jewish religion is my favorite. I love the ancient Jewish religion and I love modern Buddhism. So those are my two. So the ancient Jewish religion called the Kabbalah, if any of you have heard of it, talks about how, really the central tenet of that is that the whole purpose of life is to move from being a reactive being where something happens and we react, to being a proactive being where something happens and we can stop, we can consciously put our awareness on that thing, and then we can be aware that there are lots of different reactions and that we can perhaps maybe even choose our reaction to this thing. So, that's the point of Kabbalah, is to move from being a reactive being to being a proactive being. And so all of this stuff that we've been talking about, coming from having a full mind to being an empty mind, when we've got a very full mind and our mind is full of all sorts of stressy stuff, and then something happens, we often can lash out, snap. We're often in a fight, flight, freeze kind of part of our brain, which can lead to quite defensive or aggressive kind of reactions or fiery reactions. When we're in this more gentle, softer, mindful, meditative place, we are actually a lot more in control of our reactions. And so if you are somebody who's you have a tendency to be a bit explosive or to be a bit reactive and then have to apologize afterwards, I'm sorry, I snapped about that, or I bit your head off about the other. Again, this idea that by moving along this scale, we're bringing ourselves to a place where we can actually react consciously. We can, in fact, actually, rather than react, we proactively choose our response. So we respond appropriately or more appropriately when we are able to control our thoughts. The other thing I wanted to talk about here is actually modern Buddhism. So having spoken about the ancient Jewish religion, the Kabbalah, just want to touch in at the very end here about modern Buddhism. And so one thing that I actually love telling people is that the Dalai Lama meditates every day on a different way to die, or at least I read that somewhere. It might not be true. I haven't heard it from him himself. But generally this idea that when we pass from this world, really a lot of the religions and a lot of the ancient religions and modern religions talk about how to do that peacefully is really important. So to be able to pass with peace in our hearts and in our minds. So again, going back to that graph, no, wrong way. There we go. If we were in our crazy, full, stressed out minds, and then suddenly a tiger leaps out of a bush, we're going to react, in a really, really big way. Whereas if we're sat in a mindful or a meditative place and a tiger leaps, we can consciously process that and pass in a happier way. So I'm using that as an example, but I think, obviously there's a lot of different ways we could die. And the fact that the Dalai Lama spends time deliberately meditating on what it would be like to die this way or that way, so that he can be at peace with whatever death becomes him at the end. So, this idea that really we're trying to... the whole, like the religious or the mystical element behind mindfulness and meditation is to come to a place of centered non-reactivity. So to be more in touch with our soul, to be more in touch with our true essence, which is kind, compassionate, and loving, rather than being in touch with the stressed out human parts of us that can react badly to others. And given that the central thing of all religions is to do unto others as we would have done unto ourselves, there is a real kind of purpose behind getting ourselves to a place where we're acting from a more proactive and a less reactive place. We're then kinder to others, and we're doing to others what we would like done to us. So that's a little bit of mystification, not too much. I like to keep everything quite grounded. But I hope that has helped explain a little bit more. And obviously, I hope the summary was helpful. If you haven't watched the other parts 1 to 4, you can find them on my YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube and search Cosmic Teapot UK, or you can find them on my Facebook page, again, Cosmic Teapot UK, or on LinkedIn, Cheryl Barnes. And actually, these are just some contact details here. So if you want to get in touch with me, there's my email address, cheryl@cosmicteapot.co.uk, my website, or my phone number. I'd love to hear from you. I always love talking to people about these concepts. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope you've enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you on some lives in the future. Take care.